Ya, pero en el fondo, sí, se encuentro bastante hecho los
Francisco. Good morning. Welcome to the workshop Renewable Energies and Climate Change in the G20 Process from the South of the world to the world. Please, before you start, silence your cell phones and wear your mask properly through this activity. The Faculty of Economic and Administrative Science of the University of Chile welcomes to the workshop Renewable Energies and Climate Change in the G20, a process from the south of the world to the world, which we are organizing with the Embassy of Indonesia. Welcome His Excellency Mohamed Anshar, Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia and the Republic of Chile. Dr. César Guala Catalán, Vice Dean of the Faculty of Economic and Administrative Science at the University of Chile. Mr. Yudo Inwanda Priagit, Expert Staff for Strategic Planning of the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, Chair of the G20 Energy Transition Working Group. Mrs. Maite Castro, Ministerial Regional Secretary of Science, Technology and Innovation in Los Ríos. Mrs. Silvia Soto, Manager of the Los Ríos Regional Productive Development Corporation. Dr. Gonzalo Garcia, Senior Economist of the Chilean Central Bank. Dr. Felix Fuller, Economist and Professor at the Faculty of Administration and Economic Science, University of Chile. Dr. Olga Barbosa, Ecologist, Professor and Director of International Relations at the University of Chile. Dr. José Saavedra and Felipe Valencia, Professors of the Faculty of Engineering Research associated with Invent Research Center in Innovative Energy Technologies at the University of Chile. Academics and students, special guests, people who follow the broadcast both Zoom and YouTube. This activity is part of the collaborative work that our faculty has been developing for some time with the Indonesian Embassy in matters of common interest. The issue that brings us together today, climate change and measures to mitigate its effects, are part of the approach that our faculty is promoting in our undergrad and postgrad programs. Understanding that this is a global challenge that we must face from all perspectives, including economics and administrative science. The first words will be said by the Vice Dean, Professor César Guala. Please.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you again for joining us today, and thank you as well for making the links for organizing this activity with partner universities in Indonesia. I want to say hi as well to the regional, to the manager of the Corporación de Comercio Productivo, and Gonzalo from Central Bank representative. For us, this is a topic of common interest, since we define and we think that economy has a key role to play, not only for making people's life better, but also because there is a key issue related to climate change, and I'm sorry, para nosotros, para nosotros es fundamental esta relación que estamos estableciendo con ustedes hoy día, a la luz de la colaboración que hemos conversado con ustedes desde la embajada, en entender a la economía como entender el rol que tiene la economía desde el punto de vista de su contribución al desarrollo de las personas, pero también a abordar los problemas de cambio climático los cuales se afronta la humanidad. Desde esa perspectiva, hoy día estamos tratando de contribuir a una discusión que va a ocurrir en el marco del próximo encuentro del G20 en Indonesia, y que tiene particularmente relevancia desde la perspectiva del cambio climático, las energías renovables y la contribución desde la economía. Por lo tanto, Lo que estamos hoy día haciendo acá es un trabajo de colaboración entre universidades, facilitado también por la Embajada de Indonesia, y vamos a trabajar precisamente en generar un manifiesto hacia el término de esta jornada que vamos a entregárselo justamente al embajador para poder ser entregado en esa oportunidad en el marco del encuentro del G20. Yo la verdad es que tenía un trabajo que parar por el final, y por eso me pillaron un poco de sorpresa, así que nada, hacia el final vamos a volver. Muchas gracias.
Thanks, Professor Willa. Now I want to invite His Excellency, the Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to the Republic of Chile, Mohammed Ashir.
Very good morning, Mr. Sarwala, Mr. Dean of Administration and Economics, of Chile, honorable speakers, distinguished participants, and I from Israel Gerente General de la Corporación Regional de Desarrollo Productivo, señora Soto General. Igualmente reconozco la querido amigo el director Chile. Good evening to my colleagues in Indonesia, Mr. Vinanda Yati, the co-chair of G20 Energy Transition Working Group, and Mrs. Ratno Kumilana Devi, head of the Center for Research and Energy Policy, Bandung Institute of Technology. It gives me a great pleasure to be here and join the previous speakers in welcoming you all to this important event, the Seminar Sustainable Energies and G20 Approaches from the South of the World for the World. I would like to thank everyone here today for being part of this important event, especially our speakers in distant time zones. It is indeed a tremendous honor to see so many distinguished and high-level speakers on our agenda today. I would also like to offer great thanks and appreciation to all those who have been involved in this excellent collaboration between my office and the Faculty of the Administration and Economics Universidad Austral de Chile in organizing this event. Distinguished participants, Indonesia and Chile have always enjoyed solid and substantive bilateral relations. The long geographical distance has never hindered the two countries from strengthening their relations. Both countries share similar values, which include commitment to democracy, human rights, and the importance of multilateralism. This makes both countries natural partners to one another in various initiatives to confront current global challenges from the perspective of the Global South. Since the 1st December 2021, Indonesia assumes the presidency of the G20, an intergovernmental forum of the world's largest economies. In light of the global challenges that the international community faces, particularly related to the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond, Indonesia's presidency carries the theme "Recover Together, Recover Stronger." During the G20 presidency, Indonesia is focused on three sectors priorities, namely global health architecture, second, digital transformation, and the third, energy transition. We acknowledge that Chile is one of the leading countries in this region in energy transition, which continues to demonstrate strong commitment to tackling global climate challenges. This seminar intends to take up one of the priority sectors, namely energy transition. Indonesia's presidency aims to achieve a global deal to accelerate energy transition with a view to achieving significant progress in sustainable development and climate resilience. To this end, G20 Energy Transition Working Group, of which is co-chaired by one of our speakers today, is working on three main aspects, namely energy, accessibility and security, smart and green technology scaling up, and advancing energy finance. This work will shape up the agenda of the G20 Energy Ministers meeting in September this year and eventually form the part of the outcome document of the G20 Summit in November. This seminar allows us to sensitize the main work of the G20 in this particular area and to obtain support and substantive inputs from the relevant stakeholders in Chile. We value highly your presence and contribution to the discussion today. This therefore will oblige me as Ambassador of Indonesia to Chile to acknowledge and transmit what transpires from today's discussion to the relevant authorities in Indonesia. Distinguished participants, to conclude, I would like to reiterate my highest appreciation to the Faculty of Administration and Economics that of Chile for hosting this important event. With that, I very much look forward to a robust exchange of ideas and wish you all a more successful seminar. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your words, Ambassador. Our first speaker is Mr. Yudo Nwanda, expert staff for strategic planning of the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, chair of the G20 Energy Transition Working Group. His presentation is about sustainable energies and climate change challenge.
Thank you. Can you hear me clearly? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. His Excellency Muhammad Ansor, Indonesian Ambassador to Chile, Dr. Cesar Guala, Vice Dean, and then Dr. Retno Gumangdewi, our speaker and presenters from Chilean Indonesian colleagues. Apology, cannot mention your name one by one. Distinguished participants, greetings to you all. Next slide, please. It is my pleasure for me to present on energy transitions, G20 presidency, and renewable energy. Next slide, please. Briefly speaking on energy and economics, G20 is the club of global powerhouse, comprising 85% global GDP, 75% global trade, 81% global emission. On energy sector, slide 2, please. Okay, thank you. And 70% global energy consumption. So G20 is the world powerhouse, Therefore, it is a great choice for Indonesia to set sustainable energy transition as one of three pillars of G20 2022 presidency. Indonesian presidency as one of three pillars of G20 2022 presidency. We already set three pillars, namely global health architecture, digital economic transformation, and sustainable energy transition. The international community is facing critical times in the energy transition and climate agenda. Since the COP26, countries have agreed a stronger global commitment to maintain global temperature rise well below 2 degrees centigrade and pursue efforts to limit it up to 1.5 degrees centigrade. These ambitions are also addressed in G20 2021 last year. To achieve sustainable, yes, slide 2, please. Slide 2. Okay, thank you. Slide 2.
Previous one.
On previous slide. Okay, thank you. Yes, this, yeah, okay. To achieve sustainable recovery in the global post-pandemic economy, we need larger attention to scaling up clean power generation and energy efficiency. Global communities also find urgency to accelerate the process on global target of new access, mainly clean cooking and electricity, after we face setback due to global pandemic in the last, at least in the last 2 years. We also realized the importance of just people-centered energy transitions will be critical for preparing the readiness of job shifting, human resources transformation, and broader socio-economic impacts following the transition towards sustainable energy. Financial resources and instruments are required to support full-scale energy transition. Unless it is sufficient, the transition will not be done smoothly. To reach net zero emission by 2050, IRENA forecasts that we need to triple annual investment to $4.4 trillion to deploy clean energy. We also need to firm up and collect commitments from developed countries to shore up $100 billion per year funding to deal with climate change. In this presidency year, Indonesia is poised to address such thematic issues on sustainable access and transition in archipelagic and island states. Likewise, the G20 summit on 15-16 November 2022 in Bali will be held back to back with the archipelago and island states summit on November 17, 2022. These all will amplify climate ambition while pursuing economic recovery in the context of archipelagic and island countries. In this significance, G20 holds more responsibility as the global powerhouse. Speaking about G20 and global renewables, in solar power, 3/4 of G20 countries is in the global top 20 solar power for total installed capacity. On wind power, more than half of G20 countries in the global top 20 wind power for total installed capacity. On hydropower, more than half of G20 countries in the global top 20 hydropower for total installed capacity. In brief profile, let me share why as G20 we often express energy transitions with S in plural form. This is something interesting in G20 and Energy Transitions Forum, which are featured by common consensus and legacies since 2018 Argentine presidency. The working group or forum name Energy Transitions was firstly adopted, replacing more common energy working group used in G20 Sherpa Track was founded in 2009. Energy Transitions, again with S, is noted to acknowledge the diversity of pathways towards sustainable energy transition and support G20 collective commitment to promote the widest variety of the energy sources, options, and technologies. We call it in G20 all fuels, all technologies approach to ambitiously reduce greenhouse gases emission. Therefore, the pillar of sustainable energy transition will match our position as presidency, which will begin the first of 4 consecutive G20 presidencies from emerging markets and developing economies. India next year, 2023, Brazil, 2024, and South Africa, 2025. This will continue our consistency in coloring the transition to clean and renewable energy with just transition, energy access, and the whole agenda 2030 importance. Next slide, please. Slide 3. G20. I wonder whether you got my PPTX, because this is a PDF. But I think I already sent the PPTX, But anyway, it's okay. G20 Indonesian presidency addresses the main theme of recover together, recover stronger. The presidency has set 3 pillars. I said it, global health architecture, digital economic transformation, and sustainable energy transition. The pillar of sustainable energy transition is held under Energy Transition Working Group, ETWG. Next slide, please. Slide 4. The energy transition pillar through ETWG will address 3 priorities issues with the main keywords on accessibility, technology, and financing. Here they are with their full taglines. The first priority is securing energy accessibility. The second priority is scaling up smart and clean energy technology. The third priority is advancing energy financing. Through those 3 priorities, ETWG aims to produce the key deliverables of G20 Energy Transition Ministerial Communique and its annexes, with the tagline, achieve global deal to accelerate energy transition, matching with current challenges. The content of the key deliverables is also expected to strengthen the presidency flagship document in the G20 summit, which is G20 Comprehensive Exit Strategy to Support Recovery. We call all this journey as the road to Bali. Next slide, please, slide 5. Here in this slide, I show to you our plan on the road to Bali. We will have 3 ETWGs meeting and 1 ET ministerial meeting, and of course, G20 summit. This complex way forward to Bali has been adjusted and held back to back with Environmental Deputy Minister and Climate Sustainability Working Group in the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, our close partner since previous G20 presidencies. The ETWG, the first, was held in 24-25 March 2022 in Yogyakarta. ETWG, the first, presented the presidency profile and the 3 pillars. Secondly, 3 priorities, in this case, energy transition. And the third one is presentation from IO's international organization about our knowledge partners regarding 3 priorities. And finally, rolling on agenda and plan the road to Bali. So in the first meeting in Yogyakarta, all delegates unanimously endorsed these 3 priorities and road to Bali. The second meeting of working group we will have in 23-24 June 2022 in Labuan Bajo. So the next 2 weeks. With 20-25 June will be special for site visit on island sustainable energy access. This second meeting conference will discuss Bali Compact, common principles in accelerating clean energy transition as one of the annex of ministerial communique, and communique building blocks or the outline framework of ministerial communique draft document, and stock taking presentation from virtual set events and key takeaways for communique from related international organization co-organizing the virtual webinar on energy transition issues. The third meeting of working group will be held on 31 August, 1 September 2022 in Bali. The third meeting will convene Bali Energy Transition Roadmap or Action Plan as one of the annex of the ministerial communique, and secondly, final draft Bali communique. The ministerial meeting, as the ministerial meeting will be held by September 2nd, 2022 in Bali, led by Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources. The main agenda of this ministerial meeting will be final negotiation and approval energy transition ministerial communique and final approval or energy transition's main deliverables. In the G20 summit, as I said before, key issues in energy transition is just energy transition will be amplified the leaders' declaration of G20 comprehensive exit strategy to support recovery. Next slide, slide 6. Among ETWG meetings, we also organize virtual webinar series as many as 13 virtual webinars as one of the side events of ETWG G20 2022. This virtual webinar series aim to advance actual and emerging issues in energy transition, as well as absorbing inputs and stock takes for key deliverable ETWG. More than half of the webinar are about topics around renewable energy. 30 virtual webinar series are co-organized with international organizations such as IEA, AREA, UNESCAP, C4All, IGA, IRENA, IAEA, SAM, UNIDO, and of course OECD. Virtual webinar series is started from people-centered energy transition and will be a joint webinar on energy and climate G20 with EDM, GSWG, and Finance Track G20. In the webinars, resource persons from international, regional, and national stakeholders contribute. The webinars are attended averagely by 300 attendants lively each webinar in WebEx platform, and others attend from MEMR's YouTube channel. this is important to make G20 Indonesian presidency and energy transition down to earth and accessed by broader global public. In the ET ministerial meeting, we have been gathering several parallel events. The greatest one will be G20 Energy Transition Investment Forum, co-organized with IRENA. Next slide, please. Slide 7. In Indonesia net zero emission roadmap 2060 or sooner, I will explain several key time frame. So this kind of scenario, this is the first meeting in G20 after all of G20 member countries already issues their net zero emission or carbon neutral plan. So this is what we call the beginning of implementation years, the beginning of execution years. Because previously we not every single countries, maybe G20 member countries already issues this net zero emission or carbon neutral target. In 2030, this is only example for Indonesia. So there are many more from every single G20 member countries talking about this scenario. In 2030, additional power plant will only come from new and renewable energy power plant, mainly solar. In 2031, Indonesia hydrogen will be utilized. In 2049, nuclear will be utilized. In 2056 to 2056, again, the last coal-fired power plant will be retired. In 2060, 100% electricity supply comes from new and renewable power plant. In addition, we have prepared the program to reduce fossil fuel utilization. This covers gradual retirement of coal-fired power plants, biomass co-firing for existing coal-fired power plants, conversion of diesel power plants with local-based renewable energy, and deployment of low-carbon technology such as carbon capture storage or carbon capture utilization and storage. Early coal-fired power plant phase down will consider, CFVP stranded asset through energy transition mechanism or ETM program. A carbon tax policy on coal-fired power plant will start by 1st of July 2022 and will be expanded to other fossil-based emissions by 2025. This carbon tax policy will provide more green finance for renewable development. In total, Indonesia requires 1.17 trillion US dollar, or about 29 billion US dollar per year to accomplish energy transition to new and renewable energy in power generation sector. Again, Indonesia is a big country. We have 270 million people in Indonesia, and we have 3 time zones. So we have a quite big country. That's why we do need a significant amount of money to support our energy transition. Next slide, please. Slide 8. The roadmap will translate our enormous effort to step forward in transitioning towards clean and renewable energy. These are highly challenging given today's global situation, but still promise a brighter future for global economy if we could cooperate each other and build renewed partnership. It will also offer great opportunities for innovation, growth, and sustainable jobs among the G20 countries and others, goes beyond G20 countries. Thank you.
Thanks for your interesting presentation, Mr. Yudo. Now it's time for our panel, the discussion panel. Our panel has 5 academics and specialists who will analyze the challenge of climate change and review the current situation and evaluate proposals to promote the development of renewable energies. The discussion panel has the topic of sustainable energies from 3 different approaches. These are climate change, economical and financial, and clean technologies. For the first topic, we'll talk about economical and financials. And our first speaker is Dr. Felix Uder, Associate Professor at the Faculty of Administration and Economic Science, University of Chile. Dr. Fullers is an economist, Master in International Business Administration, PhD in Economics from the University of Erlangen-Nuremberg, Germany, Professor of Microeconomics, Monetary and Fiscal Policy, and Ecological Economics. This presentation is based on the analysis of market structure and how this structure may become an obstacle in production of sustainable energy. Fullers.
So thank you, Francisco, for the introduction. Can you hear me? Welcome to my little presentation about renewable energies at human scale, market concentration as stakeholder. Chile is a true renewable energy paradise. We have all kinds of clean, free energy. For example, wind energy. 4,000 kilometers of coast, Chilean coast with lots of wind, because the coast brings wind, makes possible to use wind energy. There's this Arayan wind farm with 115 megawatts, which is the largest in Chile, and at the time of its inauguration, the largest in South America. Nevertheless, we could do a lot more. We could put all the coast full of these windmills, and then we would have probably more than any energy we would need in Chile, only by wind. Chile is the land of the volcanoes. 15% of the world's volcanoes are in Chile. So we have a vast geothermal capacity. Some people estimate that we could produce easily 16,000 megawatts of electrical energy only by geothermal energy, which is almost what we need in Chile. This what we see here is Cerro Pabellón, the first geothermal plant in South America. Nevertheless, we could do a lot more. Chile has the clearest sun radiation in the world in the Atacama Desert. And some estimations say only 4% of the Atacama Desert would be enough to use all the electrical energy we need in Chile. So imagine if we put the desert up with solar panels, so we would have so much energy, wouldn't know where to put it. The Washington Post once titled that Chile is a kind of solar Saudi Arabia. We have lots of rivers. This region is called the river region, and we could use probably only by rivers more energy than we need in Chile. Actually, in former times, 50% of Chilean energy was produced by hydropower. Then there's the tidal power, which is not being used until today, and it's so far very, very little used in the world, but there's a high potential in the movement of the sea. There has been some experiments recently in last year they started, and it's estimated that tidal energy could be produced 160 gigawatts, which is 10 times what we need in electricity today, only by tidal movement if we use it. So each of these clean and renewable energies alone is enough for Chile's energy demand. Chile could export energy instead of importing gas from Bolivia and Argentina. We could even heat our houses with electricity instead of burning wood and produce the smog, as we see here in Temuco or in Valdivia in the wintertime. Until today, only we use about 45% of renewable energy. The rest is coal, gas, and oil. This is actually not that bad compared to many other countries in the world. But why don't we use all our energy, free and clean energy potential? That's a good question. And Chile used to be in a good course. In the past, as I just had mentioned, 50% of the energy was produced by hydro energy. Here we see the Chivilingo hydropower plant. This is the first one in South America, one of the first one in the world. Imagine this was produced or constructed in 1897. Was recent. Then this time recently, Werner von Siemens had discovered how to change or transform kinetic energy into electric one with the magnetic induction principle. So Chile had one of the first hydropower plants in the world, and it worked almost 100 years. So what happened? And I would like to analyze what happened, what might have happened by analyzing the market structure and using the case of the polemic Hydro-Aysén case. Hydro-Aysén was a project by Endesa, which never came into construction. They never did it. If they would have produced it or constructed it, then 80% of the energy in Chile would have come only from this Hydro-Aysén project. Since the other energy is already almost half renewable energy, so 90% of the Chilean energy would have been, at a glance, renewable. This would have been pretty good for nature, in my opinion. To make this clear, I'm not a fan of mega projects, what I will tell you in the next slide. But for the nature, that would have been probably, at least regarding the emissions, pretty good. 90% clean energy, that sounds good to me. But the protests, the polemic protests that came up, they stopped the project. At least this is what we can read in Wikipedia. That says in Wikipedia there's written that the protest made it stop. A study conducted at our university in 2012 came up that there were 50 NGOs suddenly appeared to inform people about the risks and all the bad things this Hydro-Aysén project would have done to the people and to the communities and to the rivers and the fishes. And so it was not produced at the end. But in effect, Hydro-Aysén wouldn't have been the first hydropower plant. Actually, this photo is another one. There's lots of hydropower plants in Chile. So why didn't they come up with all those arguments against the other plants? What happened with Hydro-Aysén? And that comes into my idea, into my mind, that this has to do not with all the arguments they brought forth, but with something completely else. Who would have gained and who would have lost? Well, who would have gained? I think the consumer, because lots of more energy means lower prices. In nature, at least the nature and our air, because we would need to burn less diesel. Would have lost? Well, Enel. Enel is the monopolistic producer of energy in Chile, and of course, the monopoly does not want competition. So they would do everything to not have competition by Endesa. As I said, Hydro-Aysén was done by Endesa, which is the big competitor of Enel, even in the world, not only in Chile. There is this fight between Endesa from Spain and Enel from Italy to dominate Latin American markets. And what happened in 2016? In 2016, Until 2016, Enel held a dominant position in Chile. But what happened then? In 2016, Endesa and Chile and Enel fused. They became one company. So suddenly the polemic and all the problem ceased. There was no one was talking about hydrogen anymore. Of course, now it's all Enel. Enel, one company, a monopolist, does not make competition to itself. In my opinion, this is the reason why this is not a theme anymore. Not because of the arguments brought forth. But again, I'm also not a fan of mega projects. And I will tell you another case of the power of lobbyists of the big companies to produce electric energy. The case of Germany. In Germany, 51% we have now by renewable energy. In fact, actually, I think it's even a little bit more. I'll tell you in the next slide why. This is great. 10, 20 years ago, we had almost nothing, or only 10%. So this has improved a lot. Why did it improve? Because millions of small-scale producers were subsidized. The government subsidized that people put windmills in their gardens, or solar panels in their houses, or they use biomass energy. All this is used to be subsidized, and it was great. It worked great. Now we have 51% of renewable energy in Germany. And I think it's even more because the solar energy, it says it's only 2.3%, but at least I think it's lots more. This is the 2.3 which people inject into the grid. That means which they produce more than they need. Because they have the roof full of solar panels, they produce for themselves, and only the rest they put into the grid. The rest are the 2.3. So if you calculate also what the people use by themselves, probably more than 51% of the energy is produced with renewable energy. Well, this is very good, not only for nature. This is what in economics we call perfect competition. Millions of small-scale producers competing by each other. This is great, not only for nature, but only for the economy. This is perfect competition. But of course, who doesn't want this? Who doesn't like this? Well, the four big oligopolist producers of energy. They don't like this. They don't like competition. They want to be monopolist, near-to monopolist. So they seem to have still a very good lobby to the German government. And what happened? This great system, as we could also call this energy democracy. This is a new topic, not energy democracy. This good system with energy democracy, with perfect competition, with decentralized producing of small-scale energy, is changed now. There's a new law. In 2016, they came up with a new law, the new renewable energy law, the renewable energy law. Now does not subsidize small-scale projects, private persons with solar energy or windmill in their garden. They subsidize mega projects. So all the money goes now to the wind parks in the North Sea. And who produce these wind parks? Well, of course, Vattenfall and all those companies that used to have the nuclear power plants. Now they have monopolized clean energy. Well, clean energy, that's great, but produced by the big ones. And they now can sell us the energy to monopoly prices. And I think we need here something like a lobby control to see how the companies have influence on laws. I would like to end up with a nice outlook. Energy at human scale. I think this is possible in Chile more than anywhere else in the world. But this photo is not from Chile, but from Germany. This is one of the old, 200 years old mills. And such a mill, which we used to have everywhere. Look how it works. It works with almost no water. This is a tiny stream. With this tiny stream of water, you can move this wheel. And with this wheel, you can move all the milk. Here's another one, which works from water coming from, not from upside, but from the downside. And again, we see a small riverbed, and we don't need even the whole riverbed. We need only part of the riverbed. With very little energy, with a very little stream of water, we can move such a millstone. Such a millstone has a weight of 2 tons. 2 tons above another millstone of 2 tons. You need easily 2.5 to 5 kilowatts to do this. So this little stream of water produces 5 kilowatts constantly. And many people in Chile live near streams, at least in the south. Many people live in the Andean Cordillera, and they have small water streams everywhere. Everyone could have such a energy producing mill or wheel in their garden or in the neighborhood, or people can join cooperatives and produce one. One of these things would be enough for like 10 houses. If you have a good battery bank as a buffer. Valdivia is surrounded by rivers, but no one uses the energy. We burn diesel. All the energy, electric energy in Valdivia is produced by burning diesel. How can this be? There's so much free energy next to us. Next to us, there's the free energy. Some people told me, no, we cannot use it because the river is not fast enough. It is a slow, very slow river. Well, this is a matter of the design of the wheel. You need a wheel with a diameter which is sufficiently big, so it doesn't matter then that the river is not very fast, but it has power. If we don't use one, we can use 2 or 3 or 5. We can have free energy here in Bolivia, and we don't have to put it in the center. We can put it more in the river, upper side of the river or downside, not in the very center, of course. I'm pretty sure that Europe could produce all its energy only by the Rhine River, if we put some of these wheels on both sides of the Rhine River from its spring in Switzerland to the North Sea. There's so much energy, we don't know where to put it. So we don't need such big plants to catch the geothermic energy. We can do this at small scale in our houses. In Germany, people do this. They drill like tubes, like 50 meters in the ground, in a 50 meter under the ground. The temperature is constantly 15 degrees. 15 degrees is 15 degrees more than 0 degrees in the winter time. So this helps to heat the house. In the summertime, it helps to cool down the house because 15 degrees is less than the 20 degrees we have outside in the summertime. So it helps to cool down and to heat in the winter. And again, if someone has such a mini stream next to its house, he is well done. He doesn't need anything else. You have enough energy to heat your house, to heat the water, everything you want with only this stream producing electric energy. We don't need such mega plants to catch solar energy in the Atacama Desert. We can do this in our houses. Even small, those 2 small panels is enough if the sun shines to work on a computer, to charge a cell phone, and have some lights on. Well, of course, you can put your house full of the roof full of these things, and then you have enough energy for you to live, and even to inject something which you don't need into the grid. So I'm pretty sure energy at a human scale, energy to use this metaphor coined by Manfred Max Neef, decentralized energy democracy is they call it at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. This is all possible. But the question is, what arguments would they bring forth against it? I'm pretty sure those who produce the energy today, they will find any argument that this doesn't work. It's not, maybe they find the energy security is not given. This is what they say in Germany. We need nuclear power plants for the energy security. It's crazy. The best security is a decentralized producer grid of millions of small-scale producers. If one fails, doesn't matter. If nuclear power plant fails, then we have a problem. So the energy security is no argument against small-scale production. The other way around. Well, I would like to leave you with these thoughts. If you want to read about the market concentration as obstacle for sustainable development, in 2016, I've published with my German colleague Nina Michaelis a book chapter on the annuals of sustainable economics. Thank you very much. Only 10 minutes, so I'm pretty good in the time. I'm sorry, I have to leave. I have another conference at 10, so I'm already due. Nice to meet you, and I wish you a good day. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for your interesting, reflexive presentation, Dr. Fleurs. And now it's time for our next speaker, Dr. Reno Yulman-Dewey, head of the Center for Research on Energy Policy at London Institute of Technology. She is a specialist in the design and development of chemical engineering processes, and her lines of research are related to energy, the environment, sustainability, sustainable development, among others. She presents and introduced the topic of sustainable energies, explaining that, as said, this event will be presented from three important approaches: climate change, economic, financial, and climate. Please, Dr. Rindo. Dr. Rindo, we can hear you.
Sorry, it's still mute. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Good morning to participants in Chile and in Indonesia. Still good evening, and it is honor for me to be panelist in this important webinar. First of all, I would like to thank His Excellency Muhammad Ansor, Ambassador of Indonesia to Chile, and also the staff of Indonesia Embassy in Chile, faculty member of Universidad Austral de Chile, and other parties who have organized this important workshop. In addition, I would like to greet two distinguished speakers, Dr. Cesar Guala and also Dr. Yudo Dwinanda Priyadi. Through this webinar, I will share our view from academic perspective regarding sustainable energy in Indonesia energy transition. Can I share my screen, please? Yeah. In our research center, we prepare modeling for energy and also related climate issues. And also, we would like today, I would like to show that it's how the sustainable energy in the Indonesian energy transition and what is the effect on climate change, economic issues, and also new and potential clean technology. Yeah, we know that is in Indonesia energy transition start with the Paris Agreement, because of Indonesia is already ratified Paris Agreement that aim to reducing GHG emission and limiting the rise of global average temperature not more than 2 degrees. I think it's keep in 1.5 degree. The energy transition is envisaged period, long-term period, where energy system is sustainable, clean, and green. Sustainable energy transition requires formulation of effective policies that promotes increase of renewable energy, low carbon energy source and system. The system is must be efficient, I think, and discourage the use of fossil fuels and or unsustainable natural resource use. The coverage of energy transition must include renewable energy and low carbon of electric supply, energy use in industry, transport, and also buildings. Buildings is include commercial and also residential. In addition to the policies, sustainable energy transition require national capacity in developing and deploying sustainable energy transition technology, investment, and also management. We know that as a developing countries, if we see the graph, the left side of this graph, Indonesia as developing countries will have a pattern as a developed countries because of developed countries already have mature in economic development. Then Indonesia, if want to be a new developed countries, then we will need more energy, and then we will have a pattern of the GHG emission as the developed countries. Because of a still high energy lock-in in the type development, but we cannot do anymore because of we have to achieve net zero emission together with other countries. That's for Indonesia and also other developing countries, we need leapfrog developments. When we see that is on the right side, because of to achieve keep 2 degree or below 2 degree, we will need for the deep cut because of we have to maintain the emission in the atmosphere, and then each of the country or around the world, I think it's allow only zero emission. So in some countries, I think we'll need negative global emissions. And Indonesia have already determined, as Pak Yudo mentioned, I think Indonesia will achieve net zero emission in 2060. For this graph, we see that if we follow our NDC, because of Indonesia have already submit the NDC, the first NDC, and then also already updated the NDC, and then if around the world will follow the NDC pathway, and then we still have a highly insufficient to keep the temperature of the global temperature not more than 2 degrees. And then what we have to do, because of it will need for negative CO2 emission, because of we need deep cut, and to achieve net zero emission that is compatible with the Paris Agreement compatible, then we have to keep the temperature, global temperatures is not more than 1.5 degree. And this one is updated Indonesia NDC, where energy sector is will reduce the emission 11% below the BAU in 2030. And then we see that is how Indonesia energy sector can reduce the emission is in 2030 is around 29%, and also 41% below the baseline. But we see that is 29% can be achieved through scenario unconditionally, where all the support from national or domestic will be used. But 41% seems like ambitious mitigation scenario, then Indonesia will need international support available. And we see that is how much actually the Indonesia released the GHG emission. This is the profile. This is already submitted as a third BUR of Indonesia. We see that is the emission from Avolu is seems like become reduced, but in 2019 will increase. And energy sector is the second largest after Volu, but if the target of Indonesia in the long term, the Avolu will be net zero thing, and then energy will be the first largest. We see that this is the long-term strategy of Indonesia, LTS-LCCR. That is the document for long-term strategy for low carbon and climate resilience from Indonesia, have already submitted last year in 2021. And then still not enough if we will achieve the net zero emission in 2050. And then until now, still under discussion how to achieve the 2060, then if picking of the 5 sector in 2030 or 2035, and then with the net sink volume in 2030, and then in 2060, it might Indonesia will achieve net zero emission. Even it is hard because of energy sector will take roles here. The storyline of transformation, what are the economic structural changes underlying the Indonesia long-term pathway? After adjustment and recover of COVID pandemic between 2020 until 2060, Indonesia will continue its economic development at an average growth rate at 5 until 6%. Relatively high growth rate is expected to occur 2035 because of Indonesia will have target to escape from middle income trap, and then the period of lower growth around 4.5% will occur after 2050. There will be significant economic structural change will occur where manufacturing sector will more dominant than service sector. Downstream industry will become more developed, particularly in the mineral as well as in the agro industry. Urbanization will continue, causing increased transport demand. Society in general would have become more aware about climate change, and it will affect how people make decisions in many aspects, particularly in energy consumption. There will be major development mineral industry, upstream and downstream, to support technological development of renewable and low carbon energy, such battery for EV, and also probably minerals and processing for solar PV production. And we see that is how the economic is expected in Indonesia because of pandemic scenario requires an economic growth of 5 until 64%. And then after that, maybe around 6%, and then become lower after 2050. And then this is the possibility. And then when we see that is a manufacturing industry will take roles here, it means if the manufacturing industry, particularly the heavy industry, will take role for the GDP contribution, and then the energy consumption will increase significantly. And this is final energy demand. What we see that is the population will increase 1.4 times compared to 2010, and then GDP per capita will increase significantly, and final energy consumption will increase 4 times compared to 2010, and then we see that as electricity consumption will increase almost 14 times, and then non-electricity will consumption will increase only 2.5% at 2.5 times. Why electricity consumption will increase significantly? Because in our consumption for long-term strategy, the consumption of energy will massive move to electricity. And then this is the final energy demand projection. We see that this is the left side is by sector, and then we see that this industry sector will increase significantly compared to transportation and other sectors. And the final energy type will more in electricity, and other types we still rely on coal, but after 2050 will decrease significantly, but coal still used because of in industry sector we cannot move away from coal. But if we move from coal, but we have to equip with the CCS. And biomass plus CCS will take roles because of a biomass plus CCS is a negative technology emission. Then using biomass plus CCS, and then we might achieve net zero emission in 2060. And this is the primary energy. We see that this nuclear power also will take roles after 2040 because of Indonesia have planned to have a nuclear power plant in 2040. It's around 10 gigawatt the target, and then it will increase significantly after 2050. And we see that this is the power generation mix. I think without BECCS, biomass energy, and CCS, it's difficult to achieve net zero emission in 2060 because of coal still used, but we reduce significantly because of our president mentioned that this coal will be not phase out but phase down. It means we have to reduce gradually. But in the target in our government, we will move away from coal in 2050. It means in 2050 without coal. But in our estimation, because of it's difficult to move away from coal because of we have a stranded asset, and then in terms of the power plant as well as in terms of the mining sector, and then we will still use our coal, but in the good way because of we have to consider the environment and the effect to the global climate change. Then we equip all fossil with the CCS. Even we understand this equipped with the CCS is expensive, but at the moment our calculation about the how much the cost we discuss later compared to plus CCS only around $67 per ton CO2 emission capture. But in our projection, if without CCS, we still need 30 until 40 per ton CO2 reduction. And this is the CO2 emission estimate until 2060. And we see that this industry sector is still high, but we have to reduce significantly in industry sector, energy in industry, then the possibility we capture and storage. And now the feasibility study for capturing and storage for industry sector have already done, I think, in fertilizer industry and also pulp paper and also oil and gas industry. And it means we can reduce significantly, but after 2050, because of it might be we can introduce for the CCS after 2040 because of we understand the difficulties to develop CCS in the country. Even we have already started with the regulation and then also the policy in the CCS itself, but technically we still develop for this case. But for oil and gas, I think the readiness is in oil and gas industry. And using this, the GHG emission, we can estimate by type of fuel. Electricity will reduce significantly because of the target of our power sector will reduce the carbon footprint of the electricity from the grid is almost zero in after 2050, and then zero emission in 2060. But using biomass plus CCS, or we call BECCS, biomass energy and CCS, in 2060 we can have a sink here and we can absorb the emission from other sector. It means we can have net zero emission in 2060. And in power sector, we see that this is by type of energy. There are some other renewable, included hydrogen and nuclear, and also biofuel, geothermal, biomass, wind, solar, hydro. This is a type of the rest of the CO2 come from the fossil fuels. And technology and investment need. Which technology to be deployed to achieve net zero? This is the issues, the main issues, and what would be the investment need and which reference to be used. The technology to be deployed for decarbonization, we see in transport tech sector, we will still use biofuel because of Indonesia just start have refinery, is the biggest refinery in Indonesia, I think, and will be operated in 2030. That's why with biofuel, we can reduce the emission from using of the fossil fuels. Electric vehicle and also mass transport system. And for the power generation, as mentioned, CCS will take role to reduce our emission from fossil and also make negative technology emission from the biomass plus CCS and also biomass coal firing plus CCS. Energy industry, efficient technology, biomass, and also green hydrogen. Green hydrogen may come from also ammonia. We call this a blue ammonia because of the source of the ammonia itself come from fossil, from natural gas, but the CO2 from ammonia will be injected in the oil and gas field. But from the ammonia, I think we can produce hydrogen without much energy. And the nuts industry is hard to decarbonize sector because of particularly for the heavy industry. And we see how much investment, our estimate until 2050 without mitigation, and then we will have this one, I think the first, this one in 2050, and then it will need more than 32 billion US dollar, as mentioned. Yudo mentioned about IRENA has estimated for the implementation, but our estimate until 2050 plus CCS, even plus CCF, renewable energy plus CCS, will reduce in the future. And then if there is a structural changes in economic, and then the cost will be reduced significantly until 25 billion US dollar. And what is the research need? Because of I'm from academic side, and then we want to see what is the research need to achieve Indonesia NZE related to the technology to be deployed in the net zero emission. First is research on energy storage for intermittent renewable energy, but we have to remember this research must be including handling of spent batteries, because of after 5 years we have to change the battery, and then we have to face the problem with the battery, spent battery. As solar PV contribution in power is expected to be used, Indonesia must have domestic capacity in manufacturing of solar modules. This needs fundamental research in which the objective is to have capacity in manufacturing. Then the roles of university to prepare our student to become to work in R&D in manufacturing as well in the manufacturing sector is important. To support EV development, it is necessary to do research on metallurgy related to the battery manufacturing. Research on the design of combined EV, solar rooftop, and grid. Research to support biofuel development, explore other resources of vegetable oil, biogasoline production, catalysts for biofuel co-processing. Continue to explore resource and potential utilization of conventional, well-known and familiar renewable energy such as hydropower and also geothermal, because of I think the potential of geothermal in Indonesia is also important to be considered as the source of renewable energy. Research on biomass coal firing, explore more types, shape of biomass, and etc. And research on CCS, CCUS, research to explore the possibility. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Can you wrap up in 2 minutes?
Yes, because of I think this is almost last my presentation. And research to explore the possibility of developing and deploying hydrogen, green or blue, and hydrogen from green ammonia. Other research is future research on modeling for energy sector development or pathway, and also social education research on how to make all stakeholders, government, society, become more aware in climate change related issues. And I think this is the last my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your interesting presentation, Dr. Rino. I'm going to do it. And obviously, it was full of interesting data and challenge. And now it's time to introduce Dr. Gonzalo Garcia, who is senior economist at the Chilean Central Bank. His research interests are macroeconomics, entrepreneurship, labor macroeconomics, climate change, and degradation of natural capital. Dr. Garcia's presentation is based on the concept of natural capital and planetary boundaries from an economic perspective, linking ecological and financial concepts such as pollution, overconsumption of natural resources, and indices such as the GDP. These ideas are connected to the need of implementing sustainable sources of energy that allow reducing the burden that our productive process impose over the environment. Please.
So, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me here on behalf of the Central Bank of Chile. So, what I'm gonna try to do today is to tell you a little more of the broader picture. We always talk about climate change, but we also have other different planetary boundaries that we have to be aware of. And of course, they are connected with the dimension of climate change. So, next slide, please. So, there is an interaction between the economy and the environment. But usually, in the economic analysis that the economists we perform, we ignore this relationship. We neglect the dependence that the economy has on the nature and the effects that our activities, both economies and human activities, have on nature. So today, and the reason for this is because I think historically, the services that nature provides for us has not been a restriction. We haven't seen any restriction or obstacle in getting the services that we need from nature until today. And that is why now we are becoming more aware of this connection, of this dependence, and we are trying to start to understand how it works. So what we have been done so far, ignoring or neglecting this relationship, is something that we can't keep continue doing. So it's something urgent for us to start to incorporate the role of nature in the economy for our economic analysis tools. So next slide, please. So let me give you, to understand this relationship, let me give you first a brief historical perspective of how the economic development of the human being has been in the last 12,000 years, which corresponds to the Holocene period. So this starts with the last glacial era, with the end of the last glacial period, which ended 10,000 years before Christ. And you can see that we didn't see much economic growth until in the first 11,500 years, and we just started to see economic growth in the 17th century. And it was a very moderated growth rate. In the 17th century, we have something like 6 times the world GDP that we have in the year 1, which is going to be the benchmark for the comparisons. So then in the 19th century, with the Industrial Revolution, the economic growth rate started to, or began to accelerate. And at the end of the 19th century, we had 23 times the world GDP that we had in the year 1. And then today, in the last 20 years, we have almost 650 times the world GDP than we have in year 1. And this is important because if we believe that our economic development and our human activities depend on nature, and they also affect nature. When we have an economic growth that is moderated, probably the effect of the relationship is not going to be so evident. But now that we are facing an exponential growth rate, we are starting to crash with these restrictions, with these boundaries. So next slide, please. What we expect for the future is that these economic growth rates are going to be even more high. So here we have the IPCC, which is the international organization that makes the projections for climate change, but also now they elaborate these scenarios, future scenarios, which they call the socioeconomic the shared socioeconomic pathways. We can see that the projections for 2000, I think that the end is 2100, the year 2100 is going to be around 3 and 8 times the current levels of world GDP. So what we expect for the future is that the historical trends that we have seen are just going to accelerate more. So this question about how is the relationship between the economy and the human activities with the services that nature provides us is becoming even more important and urgent of incorporating in our analysis. So next slide, please. So the first thing that we should do, or we should try to do, is to understand what are these services. What are the services that we demand from nature, and of course also how we affect nature with our activities. So the international literature classifies the services that nature provides us in 3 categories. The first one is provision services, which corresponds to all the extraction services, or for instance, raw materials, the carbon that we extract in Chile, timber, fishery, etc., which corresponds to raw materials that we use for our activities. The second, and I think this is the most well-known service that we demand from nature, but we also demand other 2 kinds of services. The second one is what we call the regulation and supporting services, which corresponds, for instance, to all the things that nature does in order to enhance us and to perform our economic and human activities. For instance, water purification, pollination with the bees. We need that to produce food. It controls the climate, it has also a very important role in terms of the disease control, and this is something that sometimes we ignore, but is basic to sustain our life. And the third kind of services corresponds to the cultural services, like recreation. For instance, if you go, I don't know, to Chiloé and you see a very beautiful landscape, that corresponds to a cultural service. So the question is, how or if these services that we demand from nature are going to be threatened by the economic growth that is accelerating now, and at what term? How is going to happen this in the future? So next slide. So I think this is the big picture. This is the 9 planetary boundaries that we know today. This is a figure that Johan Rockström elaborated in like 10 years ago, and now it's bigger. He works at the Stockholm Center for Resilience, and there are 9 dimensions, and we already passed 6. So we have climate change, of course. We also have biodiversity loss, imbalance of biochemical flows, land use and land cover, The fifth dimension is the pollution by waste from anthropogenic activities, which corresponds to the activities performed by the human kind, and freshwater chain. So we are already past in these 6 dimensions, and you can see in this figure, the green area at the center corresponds to the safe area, to the safe zone. And when we go farther to the center, we are becoming, we are threatening more than dimension. So we can see that climate change is not a dimension we are worse today, but for instance, in biodiversity loss, we see a very important threat, and also in novel entities. So, of course, these dimensions are going to interact among them. So we will see, for instance, a very important relationship between climate change and biodiversity. And I'm gonna try to focus the rest of the talk on that. So next slide, please. So the first planetary boundary is the most well-known is climate change. So if you can see, it's a little small, but if you can see in the left, we have the path for the shared socioeconomic pathways from the IPCC, and we have 5 different scenarios. The SSP1 corresponds to a scenario with an important economic growth, but with very low use of fossil fuels, while that is the downward, the 2 lines with the downward trend, which corresponds at 2100 to negative emissions. And the other scenarios with the SSP5, the highest one, corresponds to scenarios with moderate or high economic growth, but also with a higher use of fossil fuels. So the translation of that figure into increases in temperature is what you can see in the bottom part of that panel. So we can see the increase in the temperature for the SSP1 until the SSP5. This SSP1, which is the good scenario, is going to give us an increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius. After the last report of the IPCC that we saw a couple of months ago, we know that it's very likely that that scenario is not going to happen. Okay, so we are fighting now to reach the other 3 scenarios and trying to avoid the one that generates the higher, larger increases in temperature. And the issue here is that maybe the world or the nature or the ecosystem can face an increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius. But the reaction or the effects on nature are not going to be linear. And there are going to be some non-linearities that small increases beyond some threshold are going to have huge effects. So now we have to fight in order to avoid larger increases. If we are today, if we are not going to be able to reach the 1.5 degrees that we had as a goal 10 years ago, then we have to still fight for not having a higher increase. Next slide. So the second planetary boundary that it's very important and where we are in about situation is the biodiversity loss. So here we have 2 figures. The upper one corresponds to the loss of, it shows us the loss of biodiversity since 1970 until today, 2016, 2017. This data comes from the WWF, the Worldwide Fund for Nature, that started or began these measurements in 1970. So in the upper graph we have the biodiversity loss, which corresponds to the red line, at the world level. And that figure says that today we have just 32% of the biodiversity that we have in 1970. So we have lost 68% of the biodiversity in the world. This is the wild animals. Okay, it's not dogs, cats, don't enter in this way. And the lower graph is the same, shows the same information, but for Latin America. And here we have an even more striking result, where we see that we have just 6% of the biodiversity that we have in 1970. And this figure, or this path, is mainly driven by what has happened in the Amazon. Okay, so the situation in terms of the biodiversity loss is very striking, and this has also been or has happened together with a very fast and accelerated pace of economic growth. Okay, so next slide, please. So as I said before, the problem with the biodiversity loss and in terms of planetary boundaries is or relying on three big issues. The first one is that these effects are non-linear. Okay, so if we see an increase from 1 degree Celsius to 1.5, it's going to be different than from 1.5 to 2 degrees and so on. The effects are going to be much bigger as we increase each fraction of Celsius decrease. The second complication is that there is an important feedback between the different planetary boundaries. For instance, biodiversity, in terms of the forest, for instance, is very important to capture CO2. So if we lose biodiversity in forests, we are also going to be losing the capacity of capture CO2 from the atmosphere. So we will need more mitigation actions in order to compensate that, just thinking of the climate change dimension. And also we have what we call the tipping points, which correspond to thresholds that when we pass those thresholds, the changes are irreversible. And these three things are very important because the future looks very complicated when we put these three ingredients on the table. And this, again, makes this issue related to biodiversity a very important matter to be aware of and to incorporate it to economic analysis. So the question is how we do that, how we incorporate nature into the economic analysis. And there is where we have this new term, which is called natural capital. And it's in a short sentence, it corresponds to the value of the services that nature provides for human activities and economic activities. So, next slide, please. So, if we want to incorporate natural capital into economic analysis, what we have to do first is to measure the natural capital. So, the United Nations in the left panel presents this methodology to measure a natural capital. So what we have to do first is to measure the extension of each ecosystem. Then we have to measure the condition of those ecosystems, and then we have to estimate the services that those ecosystems provide to us, and then we have to value them. And that is what we are going to call the natural capital, the value of those assets. And then we have to introduce that concept into our economic framework, right? So this is how we are going to try, which is represented in the right figure, when we have a stock of nature that works as a technology that enhances us to perform our economic activities and also provide us with raw materials or resources, but in the other direction, with our activities or with our production, we affect negatively the stock of nature. It's like we pollute, we have chemical waste, and that affects negatively this stock of nature. And that is how we will try to incorporate this into the economic life. So next slide. But this is going to be very challenging because, for instance, if we have a tree in the middle of a city, in the downtown, or if we have it in the forest or in the mountains, the ecosystem services that tree is going to provide us are going to be different. For instance, in the coast, probably the coastal protection that a tree is going to give us is going to be very, very important because it helps to avoid erosion and so on. And for instance, in the left part of the screen, you can see the different ecosystem services that we can get from a tree, depending where the tree is located. So carbon sequestration, habitat provision, climate regulation, timber provision, coastal protection, soil protection, water regulation, and this is just a subset of all those ecosystem services that we will try to measure, or we should measure. So next slide, please. So in this idea of the relationship between our human and economic activities with nature, the renewable energies are going to play a very important role, especially for the planetary boundary related to the climate change. And with this, I'm going to finish the talk. So in 2015 in Chile, 32% of the total CO2 emissions were related or associated with the electricity generation sector. So this was the largest contribution to the CO2 emission. 60%, and this was also because 65% of the energy that was generated in 2015 came from fossil fuels. But the good news is we have been making progress in this dimension, because between 2015 and 2020, the increase or the share of renewable energy increased from 42% to 55%. And this was mainly driven by the increase in non-conventional renewable energy, which went from 8% to 20% in 2020. So by 2050, and you also can see this in the left figure at the bottom part of the screen, we expect to get a zero emission electricity generation sector, mainly driven by the increase in the solar technology and the eolic technology. And this is translated in the right panel into an important decrease in the emissions of the electricity generation sector, which corresponds to the green area, where at the upper part of the figure in the right panel. So this is a very good news. So the electricity generation sector looks very promising for the future in terms of CO2 emissions. But next slide, please. Again, we have to take into account how this is going to affect the other planetary boundaries that we are trying to deal with. And in particular, I think it's going to be a little hard to see it in the figure, but here we have three different technologies, renewable technologies. One corresponds to hydropower. The second one corresponds to, I think, gas shale, which is non-renewable, of course. And the third one corresponds to eolic, I think. But the idea here is that you can, for instance, the gas shale is going to have a huge amount of emissions with a small impact in terms of biodiversity, which is the blue line or the light blue line for follow. And the point there is maybe if you implement wind technology, you will see a huge decrease in CO2 emissions, but maybe that is going to have some impacts on biodiversity. In particular, with eolic energy, you could see some problems with birds, with the migration routes that they use, or the most important case, for instance, is hydropower. If you try to build a huge dam to generate a huge amount of electricity without hydropower, you will need a very large extent of land to do that. And the biodiversity that is in that land is going to be lost. So you have to, I'm not saying that it's bad because it's just bad. I'm saying that we have to take that effect into account when we do this kind of analysis. And when we try to decide which kind of technology we are going to use in the future to generate clean electricity. So thank you. And the last slide, please. So just a summary of the key messages from this talk. First, the world economy is growing exponentially, and our demand for ecosystem services is degrading the stock of nature. This exponential trend will push even more the planetary boundaries in the very, very, very near future. The second key message is that we can keep neglecting nature in the economic analysis. The first task that we have to address is measure natural capital, and then we will be able to introduce it in our macroeconomic model. And the last message is that renewable energies are key to tackle the planetary boundary related to climate change, but we also have to take into consideration the potential effects that the technologies to generate electricity can have on other planetary boundaries, especially on biodiversity. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dr. Garcia, for such interesting and challenging presentation. And now it's time for the second topic, which is climate change. Here our speaker is Dr. Olga Barbosa, Director of International Relations at Austral University, Associate Professor of Faculty of Science. She is an academic of the Institute for Environmental and Evolutionary Science, the Faculty of Science of the Austral University, PhD in ecology, and currently director of the International Relations Unit. Her lines of research are linked to ecology and biological conservation. Her participation addresses issues about climate change and its effect over biodiversity on our planet. Dr. Barbosa also explained the opportunities and challenges that climate change imposes on productive systems, showing particularly an example applied to the wine industry. Dr. Barbosa.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. I think our previous speaker has made a good job in terms of introducing what I'm going to talk about. But imagine now I'm going to take you to a very concrete example and of how basically climate change interacts with biodiversity and what are the mechanisms, which are the mechanisms that make this interaction urgent to basically to tackle. Well, we have already heard that we are in this very uncertain moment of our humanity, as a previous speaker noted, not only GDP or growth has been, we can put it in a frame line and a timeline, but also if we go beyond that, and we remember when we as humanity became, and basically we began working with the agricultural systems, that was in a time that it was called Holocene, because the climate was very stable. So basically, the climate stability that we had in the past, and listen what I'm saying climate stability in the past, was something that made our humanity thrive. And we are now in a moment where things are changing very fast. This planet Earth is the only home we have, as you all know, and it's a complex system. And you already showed a lot of trade-offs that has to do with what we do and how we affect nature. And the key message here is that we are part of the system. We are not looking at the system from the outside, which is something that we have been doing for a long time, even in research, even in ecology. No? So I would say that in the field of ecology, for example, and conservation biology, we have only been looking this system as a whole with us inside, only I would say 15 years ago. Well, not only me. Georgina Mays said that long ago in a very important paper. So what you're looking here is the net primary productivity of the Earth during an austral summer. Yeah, it doesn't matter the year, but basically what we're showing, where we are looking here in this satellite image, it's an index that shows us how much carbon has been sequestrated during a certain period of time. And as you can see, we look very green here in the southern hemisphere because it's our summer. Okay, so this is carbon, this is vegetation, and all the processes that are occurring here are the main processes that control climate, in fact. When we study climatology, which was a topic that I had to teach many years here at the university, we first understand that the simplest model of climate, which is a simplification of what really occurs, it works because the engine of that is evapotranspiration, basically what the vegetation is making between photosynthesis and then transpiring. And this is a physical biochemical reaction. And what you see here is also many things, but also the engine of climate. And I will tell you that, as we know, 40% of what you're looking here is agriculture. Therefore, what we decide to do, or what we do with agriculture, which is something very important now in our life, will, in other words, also control climate. I am making the interference with my phone over. My timer. Okay. So we already heard about these nature contributions to the people. Now, after you already know IPCC, I'm going to talk a bit about IPBES, which is similar to the IPCC panel, but also, but here we are focusing on biodiversity and ecosystem services. Okay, we don't longer call them ecosystem services after these conferences, because this panel tries to work in a very transversal way in terms of it's in an interdisciplinary way. Therefore, it was decided to call them benefits that ecosystems give to people, and of course that affect our well-being. So we already mentioned pollination, cultural identity, and pure water. And for the ones that maybe you already know, Ambassador, that here, for example, we drink water that comes directly from a watershed. So basically, we are drinking water like if we would be in a mountain, just drinking from the forest, and that is a native forest. So that's real, okay? So how we confront this scenario of climate change and habitat loss and this biodiversity crisis? This is one of the examples why things are important and how they interact. Let's say we know that it's changing temperature and precipitation regimes. That will also, of course, have an effect on changes or loss of species distribution in certain ways, changes in ecosystem services provision, what we were talking, and all of that is involved with ecosystem services that are involved with climate change mitigation. For example, if we lose forests, then we will lose the capability of taking CO2 capture. Or, for example, here in Valdivia or other places in Chile, when we lose wetlands, then we have less flood mitigation in the city. Okay, so these are things that are occurring already with the climate change. But also when we lose insects or change the distribution of the insects or other vertebrates, we also lose natural pest control, or with microorganisms that we usually don't look, we may lose a very important potential of nutrient cycle. So usually in economics and in general guidelines that we hear in Chile and other places of the world, we tend to think that agriculture will merely move, and now that will create other opportunities, which is true, but it's difficult to think that we're going to move something like agriculture or viticulture if we don't take into account that that production is dependent on nature, and we're not moving nature. Okay, so basically, it's not a matter of just switching distributions. And that's why conserving biodiversity and sustainably managing this, not only within protected areas, which is the main way we do conservation in the world, it's not enough. We need to work in human landscapes, and this will be critical to achieve or tackle climate change because of the reasons that I already showed you. Basically, nature is regulating climate, and it's regulating our climate, our well-being. So why this has to be with wine? As you can see, these are the 5 Mediterranean areas in the world where the wine began. Okay, look how ancient the wine industry or the wine production is in our country. Now I'm going to show you this. Well, first of all, to say that these Mediterranean regions are known to be very vulnerable to climate change. What I'm showing now, it's the 37 points in the world these are priority for conservation in the world. 37 points where you can see the 5 Mediterraneans, and we are one of them. Okay, so one would say why. The reason why is that we have a high diversity of species. These species are highly endemic. It means that we don't find them anywhere else, and also they are under a huge threat. Look at the amount of area that is shown in Chile for world prioritization for conservation. One would think then that we are doing a lot for it. However, this is how the protected areas, our system of protected areas is distributed from the north to the south. And what I was showing to you is all this area. So basically we have almost anything, less than 2% of the Mediterranean ecosystem where we live. 70% of the population in Chile lives in this area, and where we have our main, agricultural activity. So what we propose here is, instead of keep, complaining about it, let's make something about it. So we invited the wine industry to collaborate, given that, of course, they are a very charismatic product of Chile. And then we thought maybe other parts of agriculture will join us, which I will show you. Then also they were already modifying their practices because of a commercial strategy, not because of biodiversity. Okay, so we saw this window of opportunity, and this is one of the things how we can, conserve biodiversity, but changing our mindsets and really collaborating with the opportunities that we have in fact. And also we have this concept of the rod, and I'm not gonna tell a lot, but we have a lot of research done on that, but basically we're talking about identity. So long ago, 12 years ago, we began a program. This is funded by now currently the Ministry of Science. It's a Fondo Basal of ex-CONICET now, ANID. And basically our goal is that, to show that biodiversity conservation and the development of in this case, the Chilean wine industry can be compatible endeavors. But for this, not only for the wine industry, but all of the things that we're talking, even renewable energies, we need to solve this. As long as we continue envisioning only the extreme approaches of conservation and production, we will never find a workable solution for climate change adaptation. Never, because this is how we have been taught all the time. These two images are incompatible because I'm showing you the extremes of the situation. And what we have learned all the time is that we need a balance of two things, economy and environment. And that is impossible. Most of you here are economists or will be, no? It's impossible because we're talking about multi-dimensional concepts. So it's not a matter of two, it's not a matter of putting them equal. We really need a change of mindset. And that is what we do with these people that we work in the wine industry in this case. So if we look to a farm, usually when we get to a farm, this is Viña Caliterra, this is not an exception. We have many wineries, it's as beautiful as what you're seeing here. And what you see in the hill is the last amounts of sclerophyllous forest, which is our Mediterranean forests. And when we talk about, it's always like, this is the productive land and this is the non-productive land. This is where, the historical view we went through. And myself was, of course, when I first arrived there, I was looking to the forest, not the vineyard. So I'm not saying that only, so this is the first to show you how we are not only talking differently, but also we are looking differently. And what we work for is to make this change of mindset. And what you see here are these ecosystem services or benefits that we receive from nature, and the benefits not only that we receive for our well-being, but also for production. So what we have been doing for long years, I'm not going to read all that, but basically we have tried, and I think we have achieved a co-development of scientific questions, because we need to publish, we need to get grants, but also we need to engage, because we have a purpose besides only the research. We need to engage these people for them to take the science and therefore make good decisions and make the conservation of biodiversity in their own farms. So it might be obvious, but we're working with people that their main goal is not conservation, it's production of wine in this case, okay? So we cannot simply say, well, they should preserve their land. No, they really need to make the knowledge, the science for themselves and make them the decision. So we have been doing science for a long time to show them, to demonstrate them how they depend on these ecosystem services. And then we are changing and putting that science in, for example, things like this, which is like a small book where they can see the guidelines or the practices that they should be doing in the farm, but on a scientific basis. Yeah? And for that, we have two things to do. First of all, we don't wait until our paper is published. We give them the information as soon as we have, and they collaborate in our research. We just have some weeks ago, finally we got accepted a paper in the Journal of Applied Ecology, which is a very good journal, with many of them as co-authors. That's the road that we want to take. And the other thing is that we make them, we transfer this knowledge in a way that it's also that's also an innovation in how education occurs, non-formal education, through these workshops that I will show you in some images. Basically, in the way that we know that science should be for all, science is a right, and basically not only science but knowledge. So basically, what we do here is to give them the knowledge they need as a right. What we do here is that we use different methodologies that I'm not going to explain in deep here, but we use the methodologies that we know that are going to give them the fundamentals of the practices that they will use. We don't go and say, you need to make this practice. We show them how the system, how nature and our practices work together so that they get convinced with their own experience. So, for example, this is an exercise where you need to describe the point of view that you have as a grower, but also if you would be, for example, a fox or a bird. And this exercise is very important also because it helps to understand how landscape works and whatever the practices, agricultural practices or for conservation practices, they need to be on a target of what you want for your farm. And this is important because if not, they make decisions that then they don't have any return, and therefore they don't continue making any conservation efforts. We have trained that amount of people already in these 12 years. And also we have, these are the, if someone wants to read the papers, we have already shown, I mean, we have already tested if our way of transferring this knowledge is effective. It is effective. We know that people that work with us use that knowledge and change the practices. And then also we know that at least knowledge, which is one part of at least 5 concepts that are important so that you make changes in your activity, and we know that knowledge increases. Today, all the vineyards that are working with us, they preserve almost 3 hectares per production hectare. Yeah, as you can see, some of them have like 7 hectares of conservation per hectare of production, others has less. However, if we see that we have that huge amount of hectares of native forests that are under conservation agreements, these are voluntary conservation agreements, okay? And that is more than 12% of that. If we look at the protected area system, we would increase 12% of the area in the Mediterranean for conservation. And the other important thing where it says climate change mitigation is that we have measured how much carbon has been sequestered by the trees, by the plants basically. Beware that 60% of the global carbon is in the sediments and in the soil, okay? But it's very difficult to measure it. So usually we're talking about above ground carbon sequestration. And there are forests, a small forest, that the small or big that they would have, we have 24 tons of carbon per hectare. This means that if they decide to change it, to change that, which is possible with our weak law today, if they change that forest for a vineyard, for example, we will lose around 20 tons of carbon, no? Because it will be replaced by 5 tons of carbon with a vineyard, which I want to say also that they, of course, they sequester carbon. So we should also be talking, which is not in the incentive, how these people can take back also an incentive of not taking the forest down, basically preserving the forest. And disease and many of these other mechanisms say, yeah, you were going to begin at 0. So basically, if this is your baseline, and then you have to go beyond that. So that is neglecting all the areas of natural forests that we already have. And that is a problem. Because in that case, if we change, we make accountability, maybe it's better that you lose that forest with a fire and then plant something else. And that is the truth, that those are things that happen all the time, unfortunately. So basically, when we talk about climate change adaptation, if we get this multifunctional landscape that provides several ecosystem services, like pest control or like pollination, like yeast and lactic bacteria that are very important in the wine, and we have a lot of evidence about it. And the RAF, for example, which is something that has direct effect on the business of wine, then we are making a good deal, because conservation has to do with climate and has to do with business. So today we have been able to have a replicability and upscaling of this. So basically the growers, the wine industry has made a pledge to their association, and now their conservation practices are part of the national sustainability goal. It was not us that asked for that, they asked it. And we have a lot of people that are already, asking for these changes. So to finish, we need to remember, as we talked and we have been talking today, that this is a system. So we cannot look climate change as a different thing of what happens in the earth. This is very important. It has only been 5 years ago when IPCC made a common meeting with IPBES. So climate talking with ecosystem services and biodiversity. This only happened like 3 years ago. Okay, so we need to move fast on this. Also, well, this is what I said, and I like very much how you mentioned. That I think it was something that said the president, the new president of the central bank. If you are planning to make a business without taking account nature, you're just doing bad business and bad economics. That is of the past century. Also, very important, we usually complain that we don't have enough science to make decisions. Well, I can tell you that we have science to make decisions. What we are still lacking, that we are working on, and we have already some mechanisms, is that it's very difficult to make the science to get to decisions in the central government or in the parliament, etc. And that is something that has not been solved in any part of the world. As the first speaker, there are other interests also, and we need to achieve a way of taking account of that. But not only taking account in terms of complaining about it, we need to sit down and solve this problem. And my final message is that there are lots of things that we should be doing. I am glad that you invited me as as an ecologist in this seminar. Hopefully we will have more time to talk about it. But basically, it's time to act. Now we have the knowledge and we have the most of the tools. So that's the main message. So thank you very much. That's all.
Thanks for your interesting presentation, Dr. Barbosa. I must recognize that as a wine lover, I was a little bit worried about results and research. But it seems that we have the chance to keep contributing to climate change. So we're in the good track. Now we're going to the third topic, green technologies. Our speakers are Dr. Jose Saavedra and Dr. Felipe Valencia, Associate Professor at the Faculty of Engineering, Associate Researcher at INVENT Research Center in Innovative Energy Technologies. This presentation encompasses the initiatives and research projects in clean technologies that the INVENT Research Center is promoting. In particular, a new project that soon will come to light is announced at this presentation. Thank you for your introduction. Very well. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is José Saavedra, and I work for Universidad de Chile. This one? Okay. Okay. Again, my name is José Saavedra. Okay, I work for Universidad de Chile as assistant professor in event research. I'm delighted to be here today to tell you about Invent Research Center. What is Invent stand for? Invent, UAPH, stands for Innovative Energy Technology. It's a research center that aim to develop innovative technologies in the energy sector. We are inspired to provide a creative solution to challenges that arise from industry and public entities in the energy sector. Our organization is interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary, and our main authority is a council formed by 6 UH macro units, as known as faculty. So we have the Faculty of Forest Science and Natural Resources, the Faculty of Agricultural and Food Science, the Faculty of Science, the Faculty of Engineering Science, and the Patagonia Campus, and the Faculty of Architecture and Arts. We have different research lines, and in order to accomplish our mission, we divide in 3 different lines. The lines are energy storage and conversions devices, energy efficiency and clean heating systems, and smart farming and sensor technology.
The first research line are energy storage and conversion devices. This line focuses on the explore the integration of storage technology in the Chilean market, focus on lithium, ion, and hydrogen-based technology. We define models and methods that can help to know the charge on the health of different technologies. Okay, so the second research line are energy efficiency and clean heating system. This line focuses on the research and development of clean and renewable energy systems such as geothermal and solar in order to replace traditional building and heating systems. We look forward to energy efficient technology that can be applied at various scales in urban areas. So also in housing in district and city levels. Reducing this way energy consumption in the commercial, residential, public, and industrial sector. We also evaluate the socio-techno-economic challenges to help to replace traditional and commonly polluted energy and heating systems with cleaner and more efficient technology. So the third research line is smart farming and sensor technologies. The main object is to develop sensor networks that acquire real-time data such as temperature, humidity, solar irradiance, artificial light, and irrigation along with general variables of the crops evolution. We think, by example, in hydration and quality of fruits. We investigate as well the use of alternative energy sources such as geothermal energy for the air conditioning and of greenhouses, and photovoltaic panels or wind energy for the optimal management of resources. We are also involved in different projects as a electromobility center. We have a project also in energy storage characterization. We developed a software tool to design urban facilities, and also we work in urban efficient fuels. I also myself involved in cattle sensoring. I didn't put that there, but I'm involved in cattle sensoring with Virginia Tech to improve the measure of different variables that allow the cattle be more resource efficient. Okay. Okay, we are different. We have a different partner across the country, and also different connection worldwide. Especially now we have Dr. Felipe Valencia. We will talk about a center for the production of transformation of forestry and agriculture. We have different projects. We have many ways to do things. In 3 years along that the project is aged, we are already in proposing solution and with working solution, and we continue to grow. We know the economic indicators from different partners, and now Felipe will introduce you a center that we want to form to involve different actors from university and the industry, worldwide and national. Please.
So thanks, Jose. Yeah, as Jose said, we now are forming a new center as part of our agricultural line of research. And it's a center for the transformation of forestry and agriculture production. In this initiative, we are mainly focused in 3 areas, which are smart climate agriculture, circular economy, and transport and logistics. And the idea is to see how we can, what kind of services and products we are able to provide or develop in order to tackle the different effects that the climate change is posing over the production of Chile. And Chile is one of the countries that are expected to be more affected by the climate change. In smart climate agriculture, we are mainly focusing on water management, generation and energy use, integrated and holistic approaches for the agriculture production, and other research lines that are of interest, such as local hydrogen production and consumption, mainly thinking on hydrogen like energy vector, and in this sense we can provide locally both thermal and electric energy, which are important for the improvement of well-being, and also for the improvement of the way of life of agricultural farmers, especially those with of medium and small scale. In circular economy, we are thinking on the production of biofuels and adding value to waste, mainly through the production of biogas, which can be used for the heating and the reduction of the use of biomass like wood for heating. And also we are thinking on the local production of ammonia, going through the fuel security and autonomy, since every agricultural materials are expected to grow in price because of the problems that we have now in Europe, mainly. So in this sense, the idea of locally producing all the material needs for the agriculture production are of importance for us, and I think it is important for everybody. And finally, in transport and logistics, we are thinking on integrated and smart supply chain and product dispatch management. And this is accompanied by the reduction of transport carbon footprint. In this line specifically, we are working on dual or hybrid hydrogen and fuel, carbon fuel trucks and boats, in order to see in order to make the first step towards the decarbonization of the transport chain, because we are aware that the changing all the fleet of trucks, all the fleet of buses for hydrogen or for pure electric based on batteries is quite difficult and is very costly. So one small step is making them hybrid and then move forward to more ambitious scenarios like totally electric. And also we are trying to promote local and seasonal consumption, since this is one of the ways to reduce moving resources from one place to another, and in this sense we can achieve a reduction of carbon footprint of the transportation sector.
Doing that, we are making a portfolio of technology development and adaptation. And also, we are thinking on the capacity building. But in this sense, we are more focused on the capacity building and those onboarding. Since the idea is to make the youth aware of this kind of development and this kind of technologies and this kind of spaces for get wage or self-employed. In this sense, we are also moving the economy in the rural sector, specifically through the generation of green jobs and making the agriculture sector more attractive for the young people, because we know that several youth go to the main cities, get educated there, and they don't want to go back to the original places because they don't see moving back like something attractive, and there is a lot of let's say desertification of rural areas, in the sense that all the people is moving to the cities, and at the end, who is going to produce the food that we need to eat? As a result of this effort, we have to make some products, services, developed or used in our industry, and also we have to put them in the market, and also we have to scale them up in order to get a real impact on the economy. This is a kind of huge green impact on the economy, which is quite aligned with what the partner before said. And to doing, we are not working alone. We are coordinating the effort, but we are also working with Solarium, which is a company of green technologies and hydrogen production, Hexagon, Latin America, which is a quite known company. Energética 2030, which is the Colombian project for the energy transition, and also Mitsui Group is involved, and Flexi Biogas, which is a company located in Kenya. We have a good relationship with them, since we made together some interventions in Kenya and Cameroon, and making through the biogas, adding value to the waste of agricultural activities. And for scaling up, we have Procasura and Desde. Procasura is an NGO devoted to make social interventions with youth and agricultural people, mainly at the familiar scale. And the Desde is scaling up company more devoted to put technologies in the market and then make the business bigger. In this sense, we are inviting you, if you are interested or participating on this initiative. Also, if you are interested on something or how we are doing in this sense, and talk to get our knowledge to your place. You can go there, or come here, and let's keep in touch. Thank you very much.
Let's work. We will invite you really, because we have our project take the research, but more to do things. So we have agriculture sensoring, but it works. And we, with this project that Felipe shows, we plan to replicate in the country, across the country, and replicate not only of the countries, also internationally, worldwide. We have farming, sensoring, the sensoring works. So we have technology, we have human resources, we have close to 25 researchers across the university that collaborate to put the economics indicators and the ecology indicator to merge that indicator to save us. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks to Dr. Saavedra and Dr. Valencia for that nice presentation. I'm sure that I will be in touch soon with you. Finally, we want to thank all our speakers. Now the audience has a chance to ask if someone has any question. No? Okay, before concluding, it is important to say that considering the different presentations, we will deliver to the ambassador a draft with some of the conclusions of this meeting based on this document titled as the name of the seminar, Renewable Energies and Climate Change in the G20 Approaches from the South of the World to the World. We want to initiate measures to help mitigate the effects of climate change from the south of the world. And at the same time, the faculty also wants to give a gift to the ambassador. Please, Vice Dean and Ambassador.
Anyway, when I send you this preparation, the highlights of this year's presentation from yeah, that is very much useful. Even I try to absorb as much as I can do. The presentations are excellent, and even just to collect the presentation, to release, and of course, really appreciate you going to take out the selling points that's relevant to the main theme. Yeah, I think that would be wonderful, and I really appreciate and thank you and begin Tuan Pulas Miranda through you and to everyone involved in this exercise. That's an excellent wonder. We still have people online, by the way. Okay. Yeah. The transmission. Good. Thank you very much. My pleasure, and I have something. Just I think ada beberapa ya. Yeah, we bring something here, just kind of what is it? Muestra amistad Indonesia Chile, like mark. That's one of them, the pin and also the T-shirt and boots. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you again. Thank you. Thank you.
Let's give them a warm applause. Okay, thanks to the people who joined us in this activity. And remember that the video will be available on the YouTube channel. other kind of, you know,
Los speakers, por favor, podemos tomar una foto grupal.
Muchas gracias. Súper interesante lo que planteas. Sin coherencia, el tocayo de apellido, no tenía idea usted, porque necesitamos hacer un mapeo estratégico de actores, tenemos un doctor legal que está ahí, lo estamos articulando con otras universidades. Así que vamos a estar en contacto. Yo lo voy a buscar. De hecho,